When we picture the Wild West, we think of dusty saloons, cowboys with a drink in each hand, and poker games where cheating could earn you a bullet. But was the American frontier really as soaked in alcohol as Hollywood suggests? The answer is a resounding yes. Booze wasn't just a vice on the frontier. It was a daily ritual, a business lubricant, and sometimes a survival tool. Drinking in the Wild West wasn't just for outlaws and gunslingers. Settlers, miners, soldiers, ranchers, even preachers all partook. From the saloons of Dodge City to the frontier forts of Arizona, alcohol was everywhere. It flowed as freely as the myths we still tell about the era. Whiskey and westward expansion. The 19th century saw millions heading west, and with them came a thirst for hard liquor. Whiskey was the drink of choice, cheap and potent. Often, it was homemade or poorly distilled, resulting in a beverage so strong it could strip paint. This wasn't smooth sipping whiskey. This was frontier firewater. Many bottles were laced with tobacco juice, sulfuric acid, or even snakeheads to give it color and kick. You weren't just getting drunk, you were rolling the dice with your internal organs. In some places, whiskey even became currency. At isolated mining camps and trading posts, booze was easier to barter with than money. Fur trappers in the Rockies traded pelts for a few drams of firewater. Some traders exploited indigenous communities, using alcohol to destabilize. Records from the Hudson's Bay Company document these exchanges, despite official bans. The saloon, Church of the Thirsty. The saloon was the beating heart of many frontier towns. These places opened as soon as there were enough men around to justify selling them liquor. By 1880, some towns had more saloons than churches, schools, and general stores combined. Tombstone, Arizona, had over 100 saloons during its silver boom. A saloon wasn't just a bar. It was a post office, a dance hall, a courtroom, a gambling den, and sometimes a brothel. Justice might be served at high noon, but whiskey was poured from sunup to sundown. Some saloons tried to class things up. They offered imported wines, polished bars, even ice-cold beer using early refrigeration. But most were rough. A plank across two barrels, cigar smoke, spilled spirits, and the unmistakable stench of unwashed cowboys. Entertainment was constant. Piano players, called tin pan tinkers, played non-stop. There were traveling shows, boxing matches, and spontaneous dance-offs. Cheating at cards was common. So were deadly confrontations. Many gamblers carried pistols up their sleeves for a reason. The culture of the poor drinking was baked into every frontier ritual. Cowboys returning from a long cattle drive expected to be paid, in part, with liquor. Soldiers at forts often snuck off for a nip or made their own fort whiskey using molasses and raisins. Even politics ran on alcohol. Election day on the frontier? It wasn't complete without free whiskey at the polling station. Candidates would ply voters with drinks to earn their loyalty. This was called treating. In the 1840s, Missouri, one candidate bragged that he gave away over 1,000 gallons of whiskey during a single campaign. Even Abraham Lincoln once served alcohol to voters while running for the Illinois legislature. Weddings were toasted. Newborns were welcomed with a bottle. Funerals often ended in drunken revelry. Birthdays, barn raisings, and harvests. All good reasons to crack open a jug. Even the Sunday sermon might be followed by a visit to the saloon. One notable practice was the whiskey check. That was a wooden token given to workers instead of cash, redeemable only at the company saloon. It kept wages and drunkenness circulating within the employer's grip. But frontier drinking wasn't always a party. Drunken arguments could end in duels, brawls, or worse. An insult, especially under the influence, demanded satisfaction. That's why many bartenders kept a shotgun under the bar and a brass spittoon handy, just in case. In one 1880s case from Leadville, Colorado, a man was killed over a spilled drink, and the shooter was acquitted by a jury of fellow saloon patrons. who was drinking what. Cowboys were notorious for blowing their wages on whiskey and women. After weeks on the trail, the saloon was always their first stop. Some claimed to drink snakebite cures, usually whiskey mixed with gunpowder. Most just took whatever rotgut was on hand. Miners, trapped in claustrophobic tunnels for 12-hour shifts, sought escape in liquor, cards, and dancing girls. During the Comstock lode boom in Nevada, one town reportedly drank over 10,000 gallons of whiskey in a single month, more than its entire water supply. Railroad workers, many of them immigrants from China, Ireland, or Eastern Europe, brought their own drinking traditions. Saloons near camps were often segregated by nationality. Irish crews favored whiskey. Germans brewed and drank beer, laying the groundwork for some of the West's first breweries. Women drank too, often in secret. Female saloon owners and entertainers could be the heaviest drinkers of all. Higher-end saloons had ladies' parlors, with curtained booths for more private sipping. Some women formed their own drinking circles. They shared recipes for tonics, some medicinal, some recreational. Figures like Poker Alice and Kitty Leroy were known not just for gambling, but for their legendary tolerance for strong drink. Indigenous tribes had diverse relationships with alcohol. Some had cultural taboos against it. Others suffered devastating effects from its introduction. The federal government used alcohol abuse as an excuse for tighter control, despite being part of the problem. Laws banning alcohol sales to Native Americans were passed, but rarely enforced. Missionaries and Indian agents in the 1870s documented widespread abuse, often encouraged by illegal traders. Sobriety as resistance. Interestingly, there were also movements within indigenous nations to resist the destructive influence of alcohol. Leaders, such as Handsome Lake of the Seneca Nation, promoted temperance as part of a broader cultural revival. Similarly, some Western tribes adopted formal prohibitions on alcohol in their own legal codes, long before federal law enforced it. Likewise, Mormon settlers in the Utah Territory stood in stark contrast to the hard-drinking culture of their neighbors. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints preached abstinence from alcohol, and many Mormon communities passed ordinances to ban its sale outright. These so-called dry zones became early testing grounds for broader prohibitionist efforts that would sweep the country in the early 20th century. The temperance movement rides in. By the late 1800s, the West was changing. Railroads brought more women, families, and preachers. Churches and temperance societies started taking root, pushing for sobriety in towns once ruled by liquor. Organizations like the Women's Christian Temperance Union, or WCTU, sprang up, aiming to dry out the West. They held marches, gave speeches, and even vandalized saloons, smashing barrels with hatchets. Some towns banned saloons altogether. Dodge City, famously wild in its early days, implemented strict liquor laws by the 1890s. Even notorious boomtowns like Deadwood and Leadville faced pressure to clean up. Still, enforcement was patchy at best. Many barkeeps simply paid off the sheriff, or operated blind pigs, illegal speakeasies, out of the back of dry goods stores. Some saloons just removed their signs and ran quietly under the radar. Others disguised their activities by selling tonics, or elixirs that were mostly alcohol. There were even frontier dry towns, founded by religious sects or idealists who sought to create a haven from the chaos of drunkenness. These towns often collapsed economically due to lack of traffic and business. Yet others thrived and evolved into modern dry counties that persist to this day. Alcohol as medicine and comfort whiskey wasn't just for getting hammered. It was used as medicine, disinfectant, and painkiller. Doctors prescribed it for everything from snake bites to childbirth. Soldiers and cowboys alike used it to dull pain, fight cold, and treat everything from toothaches to dysentery. The famous frontier remedy for a gunshot wound? A shot of whiskey for the patient, and one for the surgeon. Anesthesia was often in short supply, and whiskey filled the void. It also helped ease loneliness and homesickness, especially for those far from loved ones. Many home remedies called for whiskey. Cough syrups, digestive tonics, and liniments often had high alcohol content. Traveling patent medicine sellers hawked concoctions with names like Old Doctor, Bill's Universal Cure, and Madame Leroux's Elixir of Youth, which were basically booze with herbs and sugar. Whiskey also served a ceremonial function. Settlers would bless a new house with a shared drink, or toast the founding of a new town over a communal barrel. In this way, alcohol became embedded not just in the physical rituals of the frontier, but in its cultural psyche. The dark side of the bottle. With widespread drinking came widespread problems. Alcohol-fueled violence was common, and not all saloon stories ended with a laugh and a hangover. Domestic abuse, poverty, and addiction were rampant. Families were torn apart by alcoholism, and communities struggled to manage the fallout. Frontier justice was often swift and brutal. If a drunk shot up a saloon or beat someone to death in a brawl, the community might respond with a lynching or a vigilante court. Lawmen like Wyatt Earp made their names trying to bring order to places where drunkenness was the norm, not the exception. And not everyone survived their nights out. There are numerous reports of cowboys freezing to death on the prairie after passing out drunk, or gamblers stabbed over a rigged hand of cards. A famous story from Montana tells of a man who tried to ride his horse home while blackout drunk, and froze solid in the saddle. Coroner records from towns like Virginia City and Abilene detail dozens of deaths, with alcohol listed as a contributing factor. High noon hangovers. If drinking was a way of life in the Wild West, then hangovers were the inevitable morning-after companion. And unlike today's hangover cures, greasy breakfasts or electrolyte packets, the frontier offered little in the way of mercy. The typical remedy? More booze. It wasn't called hair of the dog back then. It was just common sense. A shot of whiskey at dawn wasn't indulgent. It was medicinal. If your head was pounding and your stomach was in revolt, another drink would either kill the pain or kill you outright. There were a few other frontier cures, most of them horrifying. One involved chewing willow bark, rich in salicylic acid, the natural precursor to aspirin. But more often than not, you'd just vomit behind the stable and hope for the best. Some miners swore by pickled eggs and raw onions. Others wrapped wet rags around their heads and sat quietly in outhouses, trying not to die. And if you were lucky enough to be in a bigger town, a Chinese herbalist or a Mexican curandero might give you a tea that tasted like horse sweat and sadness, but worked better than most. Of course, the work didn't stop for hangovers. Cowboys still had cattle to wrangle, miners had shafts to descend, and railroad crews faced 12-hour shifts under a scorching sun. Showing up drunk? That was tolerated. Showing up hungover and useless? Absolutely not. Many workers developed what could only be described as a functional relationship with alcohol, always buzzed enough to stave off the shakes, but sober enough to swing a pickaxe or aim a six-shooter. Some towns even scheduled their major events, dances, shootouts, and trials around the drinking calendar. Saloons filled up on Friday nights, emptied out by Sunday morning, and reopened just in time for Monday's regrets. It was an endless cycle of pouring, staggering, regretting, and repeating. If anyone did try to go sober, they had to do it cold turkey. There were no support groups, no detox clinics. You either white-knuckled your way through the withdrawal or drank yourself into oblivion. One newspaper from the year 1883 reported on a rancher who attempted sobriety by locking himself in a root cellar with nothing but water and a Bible. He emerged 3 days later, hallucinating, and convinced that the devil had moved into his outhouse. The frontier didn't breed moderation, it bred extremes, and hangovers were simply the tax paid for living loud and dying faster than anyone should. The business of booze. Alcohol wasn't just a pastime in the Wild West, it was an industry. A booming, brawling, often corrupt business that turned more than a few saloon keepers into local kings. If you wanted to make real money on the frontier, forget panning for gold. Sell drinks to the poor fools who were. Setting up a saloon was surprisingly easy. All you needed was a barrel of whiskey, a plank of wood, and the moral flexibility of a raccoon. Licensing laws were either non-existent or selectively enforced. Some towns required a permit. Others just asked that you not murder anyone on the premises. At least, not too often. Suppliers were a mixed bag. Some saloons received legitimate shipments of whiskey from eastern distilleries. Others relied on local bootleggers and traveling snake oil salesmen. Fake labels and reused bottles were common. A drink labeled Old Kentucky Bourbon might have been distilled behind a pigsty in New Mexico. Quality control? That was more myth than method, and customer complaints rarely made it past the second shot. Profits, however, were real. A single barrel of cheap whiskey could yield hundreds of dollars in sales, especially when watered down, spiced up, or passed off as medicinal. Add in gambling, women, and food, and a successful saloon became the economic engine of an entire town. Some saloons employed dozens: bartenders, cooks, card dealers, entertainers, bouncers, and occasionally undertakers. Competition between saloons could be fierce. They undercut each other's prices, they stole each other's talent, and occasionally they burned each other to the ground. Advertisements promised the coldest beer west of the Mississippi, or whiskey smoother than a preacher's lies. One enterprising barkeep in Texas offered a free drink to anyone who could beat him in arm wrestling. He remained undefeated for 2 years and lost half the hearing in his left ear. Women, while often excluded from ownership on paper, were frequently the real managers behind the scenes. They knew how to handle drunks, run the books, and keep the barkeep from drinking the profits. Some, like the legendary Fanny Porter of San Antonio, turned their establishments into full-fledged empires, combining booze, brothels, and blackmail into a business model as American as apple pie. Corruption greased every part of the alcohol business. Sheriffs were paid to look the other way. Judges drank for free. Politicians held campaign events in the back rooms. And when local laws got too tight, saloon owners simply elected new mayors, often from their own poker tables. Booze wasn't just liquid courage in the Wild West. It was capital. It was commerce. It was control. And for those who played it right, the bottle didn't just build buzz, it built kingdoms. Legacy of the Wild West drunk. Despite the temperance push, drinking culture didn't disappear from the West. In fact, prohibition in the early 20th century only added a new layer of outlaw spirit to the drinking tradition. Bootleggers, moonshiners, speakeasies, all flourished in former frontier towns. Some of the same wagons and rail cars that once carried whiskey west were repurposed to smuggle it during Prohibition. Moonshining became a new frontier tradition. Hidden stills in mountain hollows and desert canyons. Entire communities thrived on the production and sale of illegal liquor. Today, you can still visit historic saloons from the era. Many serve modern cocktails with a side of history. In some places, the saloon remains a community hub, echoing its 19th century role. Museums, reenactments, and festivals all pay homage to the Wild West's rowdy, liquor-soaked past. The image of the Wild West drinker, half hero, half hellraiser, persists in pop culture. But behind the myths were real people. People who drank to celebrate, to mourn, to forget. And sometimes, just to make it through another dusty day. So, next time you raise a glass, think of the cowpoke who traded his last dollar for a shot of frontier whiskey that could have doubled as furniture polish. Think of the saloon girl sipping her secret stash, the miner toasting his tiny gold nugget, or the preacher denouncing drink while secretly swigging from a flask. Because in the Wild West, getting wasted wasn't just a pastime, it was a way of life. And for better or worse, it shaped the character of a nation on the move.